This talk is about Redux Form. Has anybody here heard of Redux Form? Okay. How many people actually used it? Okay, good number of people. It was pretty cool. We had a talk tonight about form management. I didn't know that was going to happen, so it's really cool to kind of have like two different perspectives. The intent of this talk is to alert the React community to the challenges and potential risks of adopting a major piece of open source software for an e-commerce app. And for anybody interested in form management, this talk will also provide a brief introduction to the topic and highlight one aspect of our integration that worked particularly well. And just so you can see here, the presentation is available at bit.ly/formandfury. How many people have read Fire and Fury? Over here? No? No fans? Okay, one. All right. Okay. Just a little bit about me. I'm primarily self-taught in computer science. I was like an art major turned engineer, and I've been writing JavaScript for about 20 years. I've had experience as a contributor and tech manager at companies like BuzzFeed, Travelocity, Vonage, and Barnes & Noble. And hold on, let me just switch up my slide here. And I'm working at Jetty. Just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we're doing. We help busy renters protect their home and their things while saving them money on things like the security deposit and time looking for a guarantor. We're part of the InsurTech boom that's breathing life into an out-of-touch and outmoded industry. And we're innovating through things like mobile-first product design and partner integrations through our API. We launched last year in 2017 in April, and less than a year later, we're rolled out with renters insurance in 43 states. So I'll jump right in. Why Redux Form? Why did we choose it? Well, first of all, when we were looking around, we noticed it had a professional website, had lots of examples, had some things going for it, just kind of superficially. And as of now, late 2017 at least, has 1.6 million projects depending on it, about 11% of all React projects, so it's not too bad. It's got some good penetration. And it was started in 2015, a little bit after Redux was introduced, and now it's at version 7.2.3. When we integrated it was about almost exactly a year ago in January 2016. We're at v643. And one of the things it has going for it is got a top 100 GitHub author, Eric Rass. At least he's top 100 now. This is his avatar. In case that wasn't cartoonish enough, he actually updated to this. And the author is actually an important part of the process of, determining whether you're going to adopt a piece of open source software. Really hitching your wagon to their star, and you have to decide, whether you can really trust that person. So, it comes down to, would you trust this distinguished chap with your form state? Now, really, would you? Would you? So you may be wondering, what's actually so bad about this? Could it be as bad as you think? Well, here's some dirty secrets about it. Exhibit A is that there were limited guardrails. We ran into some side effects from it. And actually have like a live example of what actually went wrong. And I adapted his sandbox code for one of his examples, this submit validation example. And I just adapted to accept a credit card number. So you can put in, a bad credit card number. This is just a test number here. That'll validate. You can submit it. It'll pretend to send it to some sort of payment processing, and that goes through fine. And I'll just kind of really quickly walk through the parts of it. Submit validation form is the actual Redux Form connected component. And process payment is our fake payment processing on submit method. And the submit validation form, this is kind of a good example, just kind of walk through. I won't go through everything, but it's kind of nice because it has some validation example here, validate credit card, normalization. This is the Redux Form higher order component that we wrap our entire field with here, and it's just credit card number field. And I also have this generic form component that I use to actually render the form element and the submit button. And so that's this component right here. And we pass in we pass in the onSubmit handler here, and this handle submit is a method that's provided by Redux Form that's actually just a wrapper around that process payment handler that we passed in. And so we're gonna actually pass that to a generic form. And let's say, in this component, we may wanna do some extra stuff before we submit. Maybe we wanna do some tracking, do some other stuff. I broke out the submit handling here. So it's going to call what was passed in as a prop, the onSubmit handler here, and it's actually going to pass handle submit to the form component itself. And we'll just quickly look at the process payment. Like I said, this is really dummy. It doesn't really do anything. But just kind of looking at everything we had set up so far, does anybody see any problems with it? Any potential gotchas? All right, so let's say we have an error somewhere in our process payment method here. Let's say we're gonna try to parse something, some garbage. All right, so what do you guys think is gonna happen if we try to submit this?
Increase the font size.
It's gonna what?
Increase the font size.
Oh, sorry. Well, hold on. It's gonna look weird. So I'm gonna try to submit an actual credit card here. We submit it. Oops, there was an error. And look, our credit card number showed up in the URL. So it's not so great, right? But cool, like, you know, we'll give it the benefit of the doubt. You know, maybe there's nothing else wrong with it. Maybe that was just my bad. But just the kind of moral of the story is form of submission is actually pretty risky. Watch out for exceptions. We could have caught that if we'd done a try catch in that generic form component. That would have solved it. But in this case, like, we're kind of leaving it up to the author to kind of protect us from these things. So Exhibit B, you know, Redux form itself has some faulty assumptions. The fact that we're storing form state in Redux, you know, maybe a smell right there. And Dan Abramov said, use Redux form for state that matters globally or is mutated in complex ways. For example, cache users or post draft. We had our own justifications for doing it. One of them was that we wanted to integrate seamlessly with our existing app, and we're already using Redux for a lot of stuff, so kind of blended well. Another important thing is we wanted to preserve form state after unloading the page because we want to be able to kind of save this checkout stuff in our user session. So it's going to be like be able to pull up really easily if the user refreshes on mobile or some crazy thing happens. And the last thing is really to get to market as fast as possible. It was sort of you know, expeditious decision, but you know, this is one of the best we found out there. It looked pretty good. You know, it was really only around for about 6 months, but we're like, okay, let's just go with it. So that's kind of why we chose Redux. One of the reasons that it was kind of a bad idea to do the Redux persist solution, and that's actually going to store it into local storage. Well, if you save stuff in your local storage, you're going to be storing your credit card in clear text in local storage. So that's not so great. The solution we found for that is there's actually a plugin or a transform for Redux persist that encrypts it for you when it goes in, and then it decrypts when it goes out. It's a little bit of delay, but it actually works fine. So kind of saved ourselves on that one. The last issue is that it's sort of developer unfriendly. If you ever looked at it, it's got over 250 open issues. That's not so great. Finally, you know, documentation for open source stuff, kind of spotty. This is no exception. There's some blind spots we ran into, kind of spun our wheels trying to figure stuff out. Sometimes they'll merge PRs with undocumented changes. You just kind of have to wait for that to be documented. And sometimes the actual behavior differs from the documented behavior. That can drive you crazy. It's not a lot of fun. So one of the things you may be wondering about is like, how do we actually use Redux form? So I'm going to talk quickly about that, give you a quick introduction about like the site and how it's working. Basically, our marketing site is entry point for our app and to get a quote. So somebody enters in their address, we capture that address and their email, and then we show them a quote. And the user can adjust the plan, change the address, do a bunch of stuff. We're not actually using Redux form at this point at all, but we are using Redux form in checkout. So it makes a lot of sense. And we have two sections of the form, the account section and the payment section. The account section has their name, their birthday, phone number, email, password, and the payment section has everything you kind of expect there. So no real big surprises here, but it's complex enough to, you know, to need some sort of special handling for all the things like the different states, validation. I'll just get a quick overview of the Redux form data flow. This is from his website, just kind of explaining how things work. As the user interacts with the form inputs, actions are dispatched via the Redux form higher order component, which wraps all the input fields, and it pipes data into reducers and ultimately into the Redux store. And so we'll take a quick look at the birthday field implementation and kind of show what worked well for us in that. Just a real quick shout out. Anthony Salazar is here. He worked on the code for this, and he was brave enough to join a pre-lunch startup right after graduating NYU. So shout out to him. And just really quickly, you can see it's actually not a lot of code here for the birthday field. It's actually mostly boilerplate. And the main thing that it does is it renders a decorated input field component with a configuration object and any incoming props that were passed into it. And this config itself does two critical things. It specifies the component which should be rendered, which will render the input. In this case, is the checkout labeled input. and it provides an array containing configs for the fields to be rendered. In this case, we have one field with a formatter and 2 validators. And the decorated input field component will map over each of the fields in the config in that fields array, and it'll render a Redux form field component for each of them, spreading the config entries as props on that field component. And then the field component can take different values for the component prop. In this case, we're actually using a stateless function to define our component. This decorator function will accept a field object provided by Redux form and the component that we defined in the field config. And we're going to look at the actual decorator function. The decorator function simply renders the component passed into it. Remember that the component here was our checkout labeled input. It's the component that actually renders the actual input. And this is a bunch of props that we get from Redux form that we're just going to cherry pick and pass to our component. So the nice thing is that this gave us a way to kind of cleanly provide an interface to all the different Redux form props and to pass them consistently to any kind of different components we want to render. And it also gave us a nice way of configuring all the different types of fields we might want to render with Redux form. So now you might be wondering, what now? We have this big Redux form integration. I just complained about it a lot. Are we going to stick with it? Well, one of the problems is that Redux form's days may be numbered. And how do I know this? The author, Eric Rasmussen, introduced Final Form at the end of last year and addressed some of the criticisms people have made about the library. One of them is that Redux isn't required. You can use it, but it's not required. It's framework agnostic, so you could use it with Angular or anything else. It uses the observer pattern, which is a little bit different, even though like Redux form there is like kind of commonality between like how it's used with like legacy Redux form and Final Form. I haven't used it yet, so I'm not sure, but it does have this observer pattern, and it's much smaller than Redux form, so that's a real boost. So that's what I got for now. Just really quickly, you can again see this at bit.ly form in Fury. Any questions, you shoot me an email at joe@jetty.com. And thank everybody for sticking around. Thanks for Conductor.
Does it support custom validation schema object?
Final Form or Redux Form?
Redux form.
Redux Form, you can define your own validators, yeah. So that's like in that example. I mean, what we do, we just have a collection of different validators that we reuse between different form components.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.